It is difficult even to conceive of what life must have been like for Marcus Aurelius. He wasn't born emperor, nor did he obtain the position deliberately. It was simply thrust upon him. Nevertheless, he was suddenly the richest man in the world, head of the most powerful army on earth, ruling over the largest empire in history, considered a god among men. It's no wonder he wrote little messages like this one to remind himself not to spin off the planet. Without them, he might have lost his sense of what was important, falling prey to the lies from all the people who needed things from him. And here we are, whatever we happen to be doing, at risk of spinning off ourselves. When we experience success, we must make sure that it doesn't change us, that we continue to maintain our character despite the temptation not to. Reason must lead the way, no matter what good fortune comes along. Trust but verify. First off, don't let the force of the impression carry you away. Say to it, "Hold up a bit, and let me see who you are and where you are from. Let me put you to the test." Epictetus, Discourses 2.18.24. One of the wonders of your mind is the quickness with which it can comprehend and categorize things. As Malcolm Gladwell wrote in Blink, we are constantly making split-second decisions based on years of experience and knowledge, as well as using the same skill to confirm prejudices, stereotypes, and assumptions. Clearly, the former thinking is a source of strength, whereas the latter is a great weakness. We lose very little by taking a beat to consider our own thoughts. Is this really so bad? What do I really know about this person? Why do I have such strong feelings here? Is anxiety really adding much to the situation? What's so special about blank? By asking these questions, by putting our impressions to the test, as Epictetus recommends, we're less likely to be carried away by them or make a move on a mistaken or biased one. We're still free to use our instincts, but we should always, as the Russian proverb says, trust but verify. Prepare yourself for negativity. When you first rise in the morning, tell yourself, "I will encounter busybodies, ingrates, egomaniacs, liars, the jealous, and cranks. They are all stricken with these afflictions because they don't know the difference between good and evil. Because I have understood the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, I know that these wrongdoers are still akin to me, and that none can do me harm or implicate me in ugliness, nor can I be angry at my relatives or hate them, for we are made for cooperation." Marcus Aurelius, Meditations 2.1. You can be certain as clockwork that at some point today you're going to interact with someone who seems like a jerk, as we all have been. The question is, are you going to be ready for it? This exercise calls to mind a joke from the 18th century writer and witticist Nicholas Chamfort, who remarked that if you swallow a toad every morning, you'll be fortified against anything else disgusting that might happen the rest of the day. Might it not be better to understand up front, right when you wake up, that other people often behave in selfish or ignorant ways, the toad, than it is to nibble it throughout the day? But there is a second part to this, just as there is a second half of Marcus's quote. "No one can implicate me in ugliness, nor can I be angry at my relative or hate him." The point of this preparation is not to write off everyone in advance. It's that maybe, because you've prepared for it, you'll be able to act with patience, forgiveness, and understanding. Expect to change your opinions. There are two things that must be rooted out in human beings: arrogant opinion and mistrust. Arrogant opinion expects that there is nothing further needed, and mistrust assumes that under the torrent of circumstance there can be no happiness. Epictetus, Discourses 3.14.8. How often do we begin some project certain we know exactly how it will go? How often do we meet people and think we know exactly who and what they are? And how often are these assumptions proved to be completely and utterly wrong? This is why we must fight our biases and preconceptions, because they are a liability. Ask yourself, what haven't I considered? Why is this thing the way it is? Am I part of the problem here or the solution? Could I be wrong here? Be doubly careful to honor what you do not know, and then set that against the knowledge you actually have. Remember, if there is one core teaching at the heart of this philosophy, it's that we're not as smart and as wise as we'd like to think we are. If we ever do want to become wise, it comes from the questioning and from humility, not, as many would like to think, from certainty, mistrust, and arrogance. The cost of accepting counterfeits. When it comes to money, where we feel our clear interest, we have an entire art where the tester uses many means to discover the worth, just as we give great attention to judging things that might steer us badly. But when it comes to our own ruling principles, we yawn and doze off, accepting any appearance that flashes by without counting the cost. Epictetus, Discourses 1.20.8.11. When coins were much more rudimentary, people had to spend a lot of time testing them to confirm the currency they'd just received was genuine. The Greek word dokimazein means to assay or check the quality of a mineral ore. Merchants were often skilled enough that they could test coinage by throwing it against a hard surface and listen to the note it rang. Even today, though, if someone were to hand you a $100 bill, you might rub it between your fingers or hold it up to the light just to confirm it wasn't a fake. All this for an imaginary currency, an invention of society. The point of this metaphor is to highlight how much effort we put into making sure money is real, whereas we accept potentially life-changing thoughts or assumptions without so much as a question. One ironic assumption along these lines, that having a lot of money makes you wealthy, or that because a lot of people believe something, it must be true. Really, we should be testing these notions as vigilantly as a money changer. For as Epictetus reminds us, the first and greatest task of the philosopher is to test and separate appearances, and to act on nothing that is untested. Test your impressions. From the very beginning, make it your practice to say to every harsh impression, "You are an impression and not at all what you appear to be." Next, examine and test it by the rules you possess, the first and greatest of which is this: whether it belongs to the things in our control or not in our control, and if the latter, be prepared to respond, "It is nothing to me." Epictetus, Enchiridion 1.5. In an overly quantified world of policies and processes, some are swinging back in the other direction. Bold leaders will trust their gut. A spiritual guru will say that it's important to let your body guide you. A friend trying to help us with a difficult decision might ask, "What feels right here?" These approaches to decision-making contradict voluminous case studies in which people's instincts have led them right into trouble. Our senses are wrong all the time. As animals subjected to the slow force of evolution, we have developed all sorts of heuristics, biases, and emotional responses that might have worked well on the savannah but are totally counterproductive in today's world. Part of Stoicism is cultivating the awareness that allows you to step back and analyze your own senses, question their accuracy, and proceed only with the positive and constructive ones. Sure, it's tempting to throw discipline and order to the wind and go with what feels right. But if our many youthful regrets are any indication, what feels right now doesn't always stand up well over time. Hold your senses suspect. Again, trust, but always verify. Judgments cause disturbance. It isn't events themselves that disturb people, but only their judgments about them. Epictetus, Enchiridion 5. The samurai swordsman Musashi made a distinction between our perceiving eye and our observing eye. The observing eye sees what is. The perceiving eye sees what things supposedly mean. Which one do you think causes us the most anguish? An event is inanimate. It's objective. It simply is what it is. That's what our observing eye sees. This will ruin me. How could this have happened? It's so-and-so's fault. That's our perceiving eye at work, bringing disturbance with it, and then blaming it on the event. If you want to learn, be humble. Throw out your conceited opinions, for it is impossible for a person to begin to learn what he thinks he already knows. Epictetus, Discourses 2.17.1. Of all the Stoics, Epictetus is the closest one to a true teacher. He had a school. He hosted classes. In fact, his wisdom is passed down to us through a student who took really good lecture notes. One of the things that frustrated Epictetus about philosophy students, and has frustrated all college professors since time began, is how students claim to want to be taught, but really secretly believe they already know everything. The reality is that we're all guilty of thinking we know it all, and we'd all learn more if we could set that attitude aside. As smart or successful as we may be, there is always someone who is smarter, more successful, and wiser than us. Emerson put it well, "Every man I meet is my master in some point, and in that I learn of him." If you want to learn, if you want to improve your life, seeking out teachers, philosophers, and great books is a good start. But this approach will only be effective if you're humble and ready to let go of opinions you already have. Reject tantalizing gifts. Atreus, who would reject the flood of fortune's gifts? Thyestes, anyone who has experienced how easily they flow back. Seneca, Thyestes 536. Thyestes is one of Seneca's darkest and most disturbing plays. Even 2,000 years later, it remains a classic of the revenge genre. Without spoiling it, the quote comes from the scene in which Atreus is attempting to lure his hated brother Thyestes into a cruel trap by offering him tempting and generous gifts. At first, Thyestes declines, to the complete bafflement of his enemy. We are typically surprised when someone turns down an expensive gift or a position of honor or success. General William T. Sherman emphatically rejected offers to run for President of the United States, saying at one point, "I will not accept if nominated and will not serve if elected." If his friend Ulysses S. Grant had made such a Sherman-esque statement, as such rejections are now known, Grant certainly would have preserved his own legacy from the disastrous turn of events it suffered. Despite his initial misgivings, Thyestes is ultimately tempted and persuaded to accept fortune's gifts, which turned out to be a ruse hiding devastating tragedy. Not every opportunity is fraught with danger, but the play was intended to remind us that our attraction toward what is new and shiny can lead us into serious trouble. Less is more. Don't act grudgingly, selfishly, without due diligence, or to be a contrarian. Don't overdress your thought in fine language. Don't be a person of too many words and too many deeds. Be cheerful, not wanting outside help or the relief others might bring. A person needs to stand on their own, not be propped up. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations 3.5. In most areas of life, the saying, less is more, stands true. For instance, the writers we admire tend to be masters of economy and brevity. What they leave out is just as important, sometimes more important, than what they leave in. There is a poem by Philip Levine titled, "He Would Never Use One Word Where None Would Do." And from Hamlet, the best of all, the retort from Queen Gertrude after a long rhetorical speech from Polonius. "More matter with less art," she tells him. "Get to the point." Imagine the Emperor of Rome, with his captive audience and unlimited power, telling himself not to be a person of too many words and too many deeds. Let that be a reminder the next time you feel self-indulgent or a little full of yourself, the next time you feel like impressing people. Becoming an expert in what matters. Believe me, it's better to produce the balance sheet of your own life than that of the grain market. Seneca, On the Brevity of Life, 18.3b. The things that some people manage to be experts in, fantasy sports, celebrity trivia, derivatives and commodities markets, 13th century hygiene habits of the clergy. We can get very good at what we're paid to do, or adept at a hobby we wish we could be paid to do. Yet our own lives, habits, and tendencies might be a mystery to us. Seneca was writing this important reminder to his father-in-law, who, as it happened, was for a time in charge of Rome's granary. But then his position was revoked for political purposes. Who really cares, Seneca was saying. Now you can focus that energy on your inner life. At the end of your time on this planet, what expertise is going to be more valuable? Your understanding of matters of living and dying, or your knowledge of the 87 bears? Which will help your children more, your insight into happiness and meaning, or that you followed breaking political news every day for 30 years? Pay your taxes. Nothing will ever befall me that I will receive with gloom or a bad disposition. I will pay my taxes gladly. Now all the things which cause complaint or dread are like the taxes of life, things from which, my dear Lucilius, you should never hope for exemption or seek escape. Seneca, Moral Letters, 96.2. As your income taxes come due, you might be like many people, complaining at what you have to fork over to the government. 40% of everything I make goes to these people? And for what? First off, taxes go to a lot of programs and services you almost certainly take for granted. Second, you think you're so special? People have been complaining about their taxes for thousands of years, and now they're dead. Get over it. Third, this is a good problem to have. Far better than, say, making so little there is nothing left to pay the government, or living in an anarchy and having to pay for every basic service in a struggle against nature. But more important, income taxes are not the only taxes you pay in life. They are just the financial form. Everything we do has a toll attached to it. Waiting around is a tax on traveling. Rumors and gossip are the taxes that come from acquiring a public persona. Disagreements and occasional frustration are taxes placed on even the happiest of relationships. Theft is a tax on abundance and having things that other people want. Stress and problems are tariffs that come attached to success. and on and on and on. There are many forms of taxes in life. You can argue with them, you can go to great but ultimately futile lengths to evade them, or you can simply pay them and enjoy the fruits of what you get to keep. Observe cause and effect. Pay close attention in conversation to what is being said and to what follows from any action. In the action, immediately look for the target. In words, listen closely to what's being signaled. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations 7.4. Through the work of the psychologist Albert Ellis, Stoicism has reached millions of people through what's known as cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. As a form of a therapy, CBT helps patients identify destructive patterns in their thoughts and behaviors so they can, over time, direct and influence them in a more positive direction. Of course, Marcus Aurelius had no formal training in psychology, but his words here are as important as any doctor's. He's asking you to become an observer of your own thoughts and the actions those thoughts provoke. Where do they come from? What biases do they contain? Are they constructive or destructive? Do they cause you to make mistakes or engage in behavior you later regret? Look for patterns. Find where cause meets effect. Only when this is done can negative behavior patterns be broken. Only then can real life improvements be made. No harm, no foul. Do away with the opinion, I am harmed, and the harm is cast away too. Do away with being harmed, and harm disappears. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations 4.7. A word can have multiple meanings. One usage can be harsh, and another might be completely innocent. The same word can mean a cruel slur or a pile of sticks. In the same way, something said sarcastically differs drastically from something that was pointed and mean. The interpretation of a remark or a word has an immense amount of power. It's the difference between a laugh and hurt feelings, the difference between a fight breaking out and two people connecting. That is why it is so important to control the biases and lenses we bring to our interactions. When you hear or see something, which interpretation do you jump to? What is your default interpretation of someone else's intentions? If being upset or hurt is something you'd like to experience less often, then make sure your interpretations of others' words make that possible. Choose the right inference from someone's actions or from external events, and it's a lot more likely that you'll have the right response. Opinions are like... What is bad luck? Opinion. What are conflict, dispute, blame, accusation, irreverence, and frivolity? They are all opinions. And more than that, they are opinions that lie outside of our own reasoned choice, presented as if they were good or evil. Let a person shift their opinions only to what belongs in the field of their own choice, and I guarantee that person will have peace of mind, whatever is happening around them. Epictetus, Discourses, 3.3.18b through 19. Opinions. Everyone's got one. Think about all the opinions you have, about whether today's weather is convenient, about what liberals and conservatives believe, about whether so-and-so's remark is rude or not, about whether you're successful or not, and on and on. We're constantly looking at the world around us and putting our opinion on top of it. And our opinion is often shaped by dogma, religious or cultural, entitlements, expectations, and in some cases, ignorance. No wonder we feel upset and angry so often. But what if we let these opinions go? Let's try weeding, ekoptane, cutting or knocking out, them out of our lives, so that things simply are, not good or bad, not colored with opinion or judgment, just are. Our sphere of impulses. Epictetus says we must discover the missing art of ascent and pay special attention to the sphere of our impulses, that they are subject to reservation, to the common good, and that they are in proportion to actual worth. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, 11.37. Here we have the emperor, the most powerful man in the world, quoting in his diary the wisdom of a former slave, and from what we know, Marcus might have had direct notes from Epictetus's lectures via one of his former students. That wisdom was ultimately about surrender and serving the common good, about the limits of our power and the importance of checking our impulses, something every person in authority needs to hear. Power and powerlessness seem so rarely to enter the same orbit, but when they do, it can change the world. Think about President Abraham Lincoln meeting with, corresponding with, and learning from Frederick Douglass, another former slave of considerable wisdom and insight. In any case, all those men lived by the principles expressed here, that in our lives, whether we're experiencing great power or powerlessness, it's critical to leave room for what may happen and keep the common good and the actual worth of things front and center. And above all, be willing to learn from anyone and everyone, regardless of their station in life. Real good is simple. Here's a way to think about what the masses regard as being good things. If you would first start by setting your mind upon things that are unquestionably good, wisdom, self-control, justice, courage. With this preconception, you'll no longer be able to listen to the popular refrain that there are too many good things to experience in a lifetime. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, 5.12. Is it that controversial to say that there are the things that people value and pressure you to value as well, and there are the things that are actually good? Or to question whether wealth and fame are all they're cracked up to be? As Seneca observed in one of his plays, if only the hearts of the wealthy were opened to all, how great the fears high fortune stirs up within them. For centuries, people have assumed that wealth would be a wonderful cure-all for their unhappiness or problems. Why else would they have worked so hard for it? But when people actually acquired the money and status they craved, they discovered it wasn't quite what they had hoped. The same is true of so many things we covet without really thinking. On the other hand, the good that the Stoics advocate is simpler and more straightforward. Wisdom, self-control, justice, courage. No one who achieves these quiet virtues experiences buyer's remorse. Don't let your attention slide. When you let your attention slide for a bit, don't think you will get back a grip on it whenever you wish. Instead, bear in mind that because of today's mistake, everything that follows will be necessarily worse. Is it possible to be free from error? Not by any means. But it is possible to be a person always stretching to avoid error. For we must be content to at least escape a few mistakes by never letting our attention slide. Epictetus, Discourses, 4.12.1, 19. Winifred Gallagher, in her book Wrapped, quotes David Meyer, a cognitive scientist at the University of Michigan. Einstein didn't invent the theory of relativity while he was multitasking at the Swiss Patent Office. It came after, when he really had time to focus and study. Attention matters, and in an era in which our attention is being fought for by every new app, website, article, book, Tweet and post, its value has only gone up. Part of what Epictetus is saying here is that attention is a habit, and that letting your attention slip and wander builds bad habits and enables mistakes. You'll never complete all your tasks if you allow yourself to be distracted with every tiny interruption. Your attention is one of your most critical resources. Don't squander it. The marks of a rational person. These are the characteristics of the rational soul: self-awareness, self-examination, and self-determination. It reaps its own harvest. It succeeds in its own purpose. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, 11.1 through 2. To be rational today, we have to do just three things. First, we must look inward. Next, we must examine ourselves critically. Finally, we must make our own decisions, uninhibited by biases or popular notions. The mind is all yours. You have been formed of three parts: body, breath, and mind. Of these, the first two are yours insofar as they are only in your care. The third alone is truly yours. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, 12.3. The body can be ravaged by disease, or injured or disabled in a sudden accident. It can be imprisoned or subjected to torture. The breath can suddenly cease because our time has come, or because someone has taken it from us. Breathing can grow labored because of exertion or illness as well. But up until the very end, our mind is ours. It's not that the other two parts of life that Marcus mentions, our body and our breath, don't matter. They're just less ours than our mind. You wouldn't spend much time fixing up a house that you rent, would you? Our mind is ours, free and clear. Let's make sure we treat it right. A productive use for contempt. Just as when meat or other foods are set before us, we think, this is a dead fish, a dead bird, or pig. And also, this fine wine is only the juice of a bunch of grapes. This purple-edged robe, just sheep's wool dyed in a bit of blood from a shellfish. Or of sex, that it is only rubbing private parts together, followed by a spasmic discharge. In the same way, our impressions grab actual events and permeate them, so we see them as they really are. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, 6.13. There is one Stoic exercise that might well be described as contemptuous expressions. Stoics use an almost cynical language as a way to dismantle some of the fanciest or most coveted parts of life. Marcus's joke about sex. Why would he say something like that? Well, if you take a second to consider sex in such an absurd light, you may be less likely to do something shameful or embarrassing in the pursuit of it. It's a counterbalance to the natural bias we have towards something that feels really good. We can apply this same way of thinking to a lot of things that people prize. Consider that envy-inducing photo you see on social media. Imagine the person painstakingly staging it. What about that job promotion that means so much? Look at the lives of other so-called successful people. Still think it holds magical power? Money, which we want more of and are reluctant to part with. Consider how covered in bacteria and filth it is. That beautiful, perfect person you're admiring from afar. Remember that if they're single, other people must have dumped them at some point. There must be something wrong with them. This exercise won't turn you into a cynic, but it will provide some much-needed objectivity. There's nothing wrong with being wrong. If anyone can prove and show to me that I think and act in error, I will gladly change it, for I seek the truth by which no one has ever been harmed. The one who is harmed is the one who abides in deceit and ignorance. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, 6.21. Someone once attempted to argue with the philosopher Cicero by quoting something he had said or written. This person claimed Cicero was saying one thing now, but had believed something different in the past. His response: "I live from one day to the next. If something strikes me as probable, I say it, and that is how, unlike everyone else, I remain a free agent." No one should be ashamed at changing his mind. That's what the mind is for. "A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds," Emerson said, "adored by little statesmen and philosophers and divines." That's why we go to such lengths to learn and expose ourselves to wisdom. It would be embarrassing if we didn't end up finding out if we were wrong in the past. Remember, you're a free agent. When someone points out a legitimate flaw in your belief or in your actions, they're not criticizing you. They're presenting a better alternative. Accept it. Things happen in training. When your sparring partner scratches or headbutts you, you don't then make a show of it or protest or view him with suspicion or as plotting against you. And yet you keep an eye on him, not as an enemy or with suspicion, but with a healthy avoidance. You should act this way with all things in life. We should give a pass to many things with our fellow trainees. For, as I've said, it's possible to avoid without suspicion or hate. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, 6.20. By seeing each day and each situation as a kind of training exercise, the stakes suddenly become a lot lower. The way you interpret your own mistakes and the mistakes of others is suddenly a lot more generous. It's certainly a more resilient attitude than going around acting like the stakes of every encounter put the championship on the line. When you catch an elbow or an unfair blow today, shake off the pain and remind yourself, "I'm learning. My sparring partner is learning too." This is practice for both of us, that's all. I know a bit more about him or her, and from my reaction, they're going to learn a little bit more about me too. Turn it inside out. Turn it inside out and see what it is like, what it becomes like when old, sick, or prostituting itself. How short-lived the praiser and praised, the one who remembers and the remembered. Remembered in some corner of these parts, and even there not in the same way by all, or even by one, and the whole earth is but a mere speck. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, 8.21. Stoicism is about looking at things from every angle, and certain situations are easier to understand from different perspectives. In potentially negative situations, the objective, even superficial gaze might actually be superior. That view might let us see things clearly without diving too much into what they might represent or what might have caused them. In other situations, particularly those that involve something impressive or praiseworthy, another approach, like that of contemptuous expressions, is helpful. By examining situations from the inside out, we can be less daunted by them, less likely to be swayed by them. Dig into your fear of death or obscurity, and what will you find? Turn some fancy ceremony inside out, and you'll find what? Wants make you a servant. Tantalus, the highest power is, Thyestes, no power, if you desire nothing. Seneca, Thyestes, 440. In the modern world, our interactions with tyranny are a bit more voluntary than they were in ancient times. We put up with our controlling boss, though we probably could get a different job if we wanted. We change how we dress or refrain from saying what we actually think because we want to fit in with some cool group. We put up with cruel critics or customers because we want their approval. In these cases, their power exists because of our wants. You change that, and you're free. The late fashion photographer Bill Cunningham occasionally declined to invoice magazines for his work. When a young upstart asked him why that was, Cunningham's response was epic. "If you don't take money, they can't tell you what to do, kid." Remember, taking the money, wanting the money, proverbially or literally, makes you a servant to the people who have it. Indifference to it, as Seneca put it, turns the highest power into no power, at least as far as your life is concerned. Washing away the dust of life. Watch the stars in their courses, and imagine yourself running alongside them. Think constantly on the changes of the elements into each other, for such thoughts wash away the dust of earthly life. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations 7.47. It is almost impossible to stare up at the stars and not feel something. As cosmologist Neil deGrasse Tyson has explained, the cosmos fills us with complicated emotions. On the one hand, we feel an infinitesimal smallness in comparison to the vast universe. On the other, an extreme connectedness to this larger whole. Obviously, given that we're in our bodies every day, it's tempting to think that's the most important thing in the world. But we counteract that bias by looking at nature, at things much bigger than us. A line from Seneca, which has since become a proverb, expresses Marcus's insight well. Mundus ipse est ingens deorum omnium templum. The world itself is a huge temple of all the gods. Looking at the beautiful expanse of the sky is an antidote to the nagging pettiness of earthly concerns. And it is good and sobering to lose yourself in that as often as you can. What is in keeping with your character? Just as what is considered rational or irrational differs for each person, in the same way what is good or evil and useful or useless differs for each person. This is why we need education, so that we might learn how to adjust our preconceived notions of the rational and irrational in harmony with nature. In sorting this out, we don't simply rely on our estimate of the value of external things, but also apply the rule of what is in keeping with one's character. Epictetus, Discourses 1.2.5 through 7. It is easy to get wrapped up in our own opinions of things. It's as if we're adhering to invisible scripts, following instructions or patterns we don't even understand. The more you question these scripts and the more you subject them to the rigorous test of your education, the more you'll be your own compass. You'll have convictions and thoughts that are your own and belong to no one else. Character is a powerful defense in a world that would love to be able to seduce you, buy you, tempt you, and change you. If you know what you believe and why you believe it, you'll avoid poisonous relationships, toxic jobs, fair-weather friends, and any number of ills that afflict people who haven't thought through their deepest concerns. That's your education. That's why you do this work. Part 2. The Discipline of Action. May. Right action. Make character your loudest statement. For philosophy doesn't consist in outward display, but in taking heed to what is needed and being mindful of it. Musonius Rufus, Lectures 16.75.15 through 16. The monk dresses in his robes, A priest puts on his collar. A banker wears an expensive suit and carries a briefcase. A Stoic has no uniform and resembles no stereotype. They are not identifiable by look or by sight or by sound. The only way to recognize them? By their character. Be the person you want to be. First, tell yourself what kind of person you want to be, then do what you have to do. For in nearly every pursuit we see this to be the case. Those in athletic pursuit first choose the sport they want, and then do that work. Epictetus, Discourses 3.23.1 through 2a. An archer is highly unlikely to hit a target she did not aim for. The same goes for you, whatever your target. You are certain to miss the target if you don't bother to draw back and fire. Our perceptions and principles guide us in the selection of what we want, but ultimately our actions determine whether we get there or not. So yes, spend some time, real uninterrupted time, thinking about what's important to you, what your priorities are. Then work toward that and forsake all others. It's not enough to wish and hope. One must act, and act right. Show, not tell, what you know. Those who receive the bare theories immediately want to spew them, as an upset stomach does its food. First, digest your theories, and you won't throw them up. Otherwise, they will be raw, spoiled, and not nourishing. After you've digested them, show us the changes in your reasoned choices. Just like the shoulders of gymnasts display their diet and training, and as the craft of artisans show in what they've learned. Epictetus, Discourses 3.21.1 through 3. Many of the Stoic aphorisms are simple to remember and even sound smart when quoted. But that's not what philosophy is really about. The goal is to turn these words into works. As Musonius Rufus put it, the justification for philosophy is when one brings together sound teaching with sound conduct. Today, or any time when you catch yourself wanting to condescendingly drop some knowledge that you have, grab it and ask, would I be better saying words or letting my actions and choices illustrate that knowledge for me? What's truly impressive? How much better is it to be known for doing well by many than for living extravagantly? How much more worthy than spending on sticks and stones is it to spend on people? Musonius Rufus, Lectures 19.91.26 through 28. Think of all you know about the lifestyles of the rich and the famous. That so-and-so bought a home for so many millions. That so-and-so travels with their own barber. That so-and-so owns a pet tiger or an elephant. The exact same gossip and notoriety was popular in Roman times. Certain Romans were known for the thousands of sesterces they spent on their koi ponds. Others were notorious for orgiastic parties and sumptuous feasts. The works of Roman poets such as Juvenal and Martial abound with tidbits about these types. The conspicuously wealthy earn and ultimately get what they want out of spending, their reputation. But what an empty one. Is it really that impressive to spend, spend, spend? Given the funds, who wouldn't be able to do that? Marcus Aurelius courageously sold off some of the imperial furnishings to pay down war debts. More recently, José Mujica, the former president of Uruguay, stood out for giving 90% of his presidential salary to charity and driving a 25-year-old car. Who can do stuff like that? Not everyone. So who's the more impressive? You are the project. The raw material for the work of a good and excellent person is their own guiding reason. The body is that of the doctor and the physical trainer, and the farm the farmers. Epictetus, Discourses 3.3.1. Professionals don't have to justify spending time training or practicing their work. It's what they do, and practice is how they get good at it. The raw materials vary from career to career, just as the locations and duration vary depending on the person and the profession. But the one constant is the working of those materials, the gradual improvements and proficiency. According to the Stoics, your mind is the asset that must be worked on most and understood best. Righteousness is beautiful. Then what makes a beautiful human being? Isn't it the presence of human excellence? Young friend, if you wish to be beautiful, then work diligently at human excellence. And what is that? Observe those whom you praise without prejudice, the just or the unjust, the just, the even-tempered or the undisciplined, the even-tempered, the self-controlled or the uncontrolled, the self-controlled. In making yourself that kind of person, you will become beautiful. But to the extent you ignore these qualities, you'll be ugly, even if you use every trick in the book to appear beautiful. Epictetus, Discourses 3.1.6b through 9. Contemporary notions of beauty are ridiculous. Our standards for what's attractive are incredibly un-Stoic in that we prize and extol things people have almost no control over. High cheekbones, complexion, height, piercing eyes. Is it really beautiful to win the genetic lottery? Or should beauty be contingent on the choices, actions, and attributes we develop? An even keel, a sense of justice, a commitment to duty. These are beautiful traits, and they go much deeper than appearances. Today, you can choose to be without prejudice, to act with justice, to keep an even keel, to be in control of yourself, even when that means dedication and sacrifice. If that's not beautiful, what is? How to have a good day. God laid down this law, saying, if you want some good, get it from yourself. Epictetus, Discourses 1.29.4. Here is how to guarantee you have a good day. Do good things. Any other source of joy is outside your control or is non-renewable. But this one is all you, all the time, and unending. It is the ultimate form of self-reliance. Good and evil? Look at your choices. Where is good? In our reasoned choices. Where is evil? In our reasoned choices. Where is that which is neither good nor evil? In the things outside of our own reasoned choice. Epictetus, Discourses 2.16.1. Today, as things happen and you find yourself wondering what they all mean, as you find yourself contemplating various decisions, remember, the right thing to do always comes from our reasoned choice. Not whether something is rewarded, not whether something will succeed, but whether it is the right choice. Epictetus's dictum helps us cut through all this with clarity and confidence. Is something good or bad? Is this right or wrong? Ignore everything else. Focus only on your choices. Carpe diem. Let us therefore set out wholeheartedly, leaving aside our many distractions, and exert ourselves in this single purpose, before we realize too late the swift and unstoppable flight of time, and are left behind. As each day arises, welcome it as the very best day of all, and make it your own possession. We must seize what flees. Seneca, Moral Letters, 108.27b through 28a. You will only get one shot at today. You have only 24 hours with which to take it, and then it is gone and lost forever. Will you fully inhabit all of today? Will you call out, "I've got this," and do your very best to be your very best? What will you manage to take of today before it slips from your fingers and becomes the past? When someone asks you what you did yesterday, do you really want the answer to be nothing? Don't be inspired, be inspirational. Let us also produce some bold act of our own, and join the ranks of the most emulated. Seneca, Moral Letters, 98.13b. It was common in Greek and Roman times, just as it is now, for politicians to pander to their audience. They would lavish effusive praise on the crowd, on their country, on inspiring military victories of the past. How many times have you heard a political candidate say, "This is the greatest country in the history of the world"? As orator Demosthenes pointed out, we'll gladly sit for hours to hear a speaker who stands in front of some famous or sacred landmark, praising our ancestors, describing their exploits, and enumerating their trophies. But what does this flattery accomplish? Nothing. Worse, the admiration of shiny accolades distracts us from their true purpose. Also, as Demosthenes explains, it betrays the very ancestors who inspire us. He concluded his speech to the Athenian people with the words that Seneca would later echo and still resounds centuries later. "Reflect then," he said, "that your ancestors set up those trophies, not that you may gaze at them in wonder, but that you may also imitate the virtues of the men who set them up." The same goes for the quotes in this book, and for other inspiring words you might hear. Don't just admire them. Use them. Follow their example. Guilt is worse than jail. The greatest portion of peace of mind is doing nothing wrong. Those who lack self-control live disoriented and disturbed lives. Seneca, Moral Letters, 105.7. Consider the fugitives who willingly turn themselves in after years on the run. Why would they do that? They were free, one step ahead of the law, but they gave up. Because the guilt and the stress of the fugitive life eventually gets worse than the prospect of lost freedom. In fact, it was its own kind of prison. It's the same reason why, as a child, you might have confessed to a lie to completely unsuspecting parents. It's the reason why one partner might voluntarily admit to a crushing infidelity, even though the other partner had no idea. "Why are you telling me this?" the betrayed shouts as she walks out the door. "Because things have been going so well and I couldn't take it any more." There are immense costs of doing wrong, not only to society, but to the perpetrator. Look at the lives of most people who reject ethics and discipline, and the chaos and misery that so often follows. This punishment is almost always as bad or worse than whatever society metes out. This is why so many petty criminals confess or voluntarily surrender. They don't always stick to it, but at the lowest moment, they finally realize this is no way to live. They want the peace of mind that comes with doing right, and so do you. Kindness is always the right response. Kindness is invincible, but only when it's sincere, with no hypocrisy or faking. For what can even the most malicious person do if you keep showing kindness, and if, given the chance, you gently point out where they went wrong? right as they are trying to harm you. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, 11.18.5.9a. What if the next time you were treated meanly, you didn't just restrain yourself from fighting back? What if you responded with unmitigated kindness? What if you could love your enemies, do good to those who hate you? What kind of effect do you think that would have? The Bible says that when you can do something nice and caring to a hateful enemy, it is like heaping burning coals on his head. The expected reaction to hatred is more hatred. When someone says something pointed or mean today, they expect you to respond in kind, not with kindness. When that doesn't happen, they are embarrassed. It's a shock to their system. It makes them and you better. Most rudeness, meanness, and cruelty are a mask for deep-seated weakness. Kindness in these situations is only possible for people of great strength. You have that strength. Use it. Fueling the habit bonfire. Every habit and capability is confirmed and grows in its corresponding actions, walking by walking and running by running. Therefore, if you want to do something, make a habit of it. If you don't want to do that, don't, but make a habit of something else instead. The same principle is at work in our state of mind. When you get angry, you've not only experienced that evil, but you've also reinforced a bad habit, adding fuel to the fire. Epictetus, Discourses 2.18.1 through 5. We are what we repeatedly do, Aristotle said. Therefore, excellence is not an act, but a habit.